Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside the Burrow, the FAU sports podcast for and by fans. My name is Dan. I am joined, as usual, with Shane and Jack. And welcome to episode 2 of the 2019 season. Tonight we are we're going to spend a little bit of time digging into the first fall scrimmage, and then both offensive and defensive coordinators spoke. Tonight we are going to kind of kick things off by talking about this past weekend scrimmage. And I think that kind of the easiest thing to talk about is just how much better Chris Robison looked than the other two quarterbacks. And Shane kind of mentioned this last week, but kind of in game action, the ball that Chris throws is just better. He was more accurate. He's got more velocity. So I think, come Ohio State, I think the decision is pretty easy to start Chris. So I think we can start from there, and we'll probably have some other things to say going back and forth. But Jack, what was your impression of the scrimmage?
Yeah, Dan, you hit the nail on the head. I think we were all looking to see how the quarterbacks were going to do last Saturday at FAU Stadium, and it just showed why Chris won the starting job last year when he went up against Tronti. Obviously, Tronti had an interesting situation where he might have to sit out. But Chris played light years better than the other quarterbacks did. And as Shane alluded to, and as Coach Kiffin said himself, it's really interesting to see how Chris Robison has progressed as a player while he gets older, whether that's because of what happened with the situation during the offseason or just him not being a redshirt freshman anymore, combination of the two. It's exciting to see. Makes me wish that we had Motor and Kareth White still. I feel pretty confident in B.J. Emmons and James Charles, the STA product, that will be in good hands. Whether or not he can recreate how exciting he was, especially his bombs. If he can recreate that on game days, especially in Columbus, that's going to be another thing. But I definitely feel more confident in CR2 going into Columbus at the Horseshoe than the other players. And that's no disrespect to the other quarterbacks. I just feel like he has really we used to call him a gunslinger last year. Remember that? He looks so much more composed. And that's something that we're going to need against Ohio State.
Well, without talking about Ohio State yet with the ball game, I think it's important. So we'll, again, as the stats were posted, Chris Robinson was obviously the best. He was 6 of 10 I counted at 154 yards, and he had 2 TDs. Also, 2 of those balls were dropped. One was a really tough catch for Willie Wright in the end zone. The ball, Armani Adams made a great play on the ball, but it could have been caught. It was a great throw. It was just great coverage by Armani Adams. And the other one was a short pass by Kozart. He does look different than last year. Just clear, even the way he kind of speaks to the media. It's just a definite level of maturity. It is tough to tell in the scrimmage. As much as we're talking it up, I mean, the offense was really sloppy. There was just penalty after penalty. There was turnovers. It is tough to tell. I thought Chris gave a good answer. I asked him about having to constantly switch first team, second team, first team, kind of rotating players that would, walk out on the field in a big time situation. He didn't have that many drives, but Chris gave a great answer after him. I asked him, how hard is it to kind of rotate that, especially, and we'll get into talking about the O-line, some really young players. And he's like, if you're the starting quarterback, you should be able to drive the first team down the field just as easily as you drive the third team. So, kind of his mind is like, we rotate all the time in practice, so it's a little easier. It was a really good answer. I still think throwing to Harrison Bryant, and having Willie Wright and all your tools out there every drive and getting in a rhythm. But, some of that's by design. They don't show very much. The offense is pretty basic. They ran the ball a lot this scrimmage. Right. There wasn't a ton of passing. Some of the things I think fans will like, there is a lot more running back involvement in the passing game. So we didn't see last year. It's not a huge part of this style offense. If you kind of go back to the Briles, quote unquote, system, hate saying that name, but it was never a huge running back passing offense. they'd be included it, but you could see they are including their running backs in the passing game this year.
Yeah, and kind of speaking on running backs, I think that it's not Motor and Kareth White, but it's a different kind of running back. I think all of us remarked on Twitter that BJ Emmons is just kind of he's a different player than the other running backs out there. When he gets the ball, you can kind of tell that he used to play at Alabama. I mean, he doesn't go down as easy. He's got like a burst of speed for somebody that large that you don't kind of expect. So, right, we may not have the 1-2 punch of Motor and Kareth White, but I think as long as they stay healthy, BJ Emmons and James Charles, I think we'll be fine at running back. I think, and the freshmen look good as well. So
Larry McCann was the first running back to walk on the field.
Yeah.
So when the starting unit came out there, Willie Wright, Justin Agner was the first quarterback. He only played a couple of series. Lane said, he was sick all week.
Yeah.
So, I guess, he tried to go out there and play, and it just wasn't working. But Larry McCann was the first running back to go out there with the starting team. So they were always kind of mixing guys in. You kind of had your traditional starters. Every series where you'd have the quote-unquote first team, there was always a couple guys in there just working else with the first team. So like a couple drives they took Willie out of the starting slot receiver and they used Dante Kozar in there. So it was always, they're still just kind of rotating those guys. There's no true first team.
Yeah.
I judged it just by, the first team O-line, which was consistent. But, they let Larry McCann get some reps to the first team. And if you go back and read my recruitment story on him, when he committed, that was the most excited player I was in the class. I watched him tear it up versus, and I talked about this before, versus like IMG, which is one of the best high schools in the country. And, his junior year, Hoover played them back-to-back years for over 100 yards against them. And then his senior year, he had like 100 yards in the first half and got hurt. He was just doing everything. And Lane mentioned it in his press conference after. He's like, played at Hoover. He's going to be coached well, coached the little things, pass blocking. He's going to be coached really hard. They probably have a really established weight program there. As you mentioned, Hoover probably has better facilities. He probably downgraded when he walked into the Ox. So, he's ahead. And he's definitely, I don't know when he's going to come on, but I think maybe kind of like a Motor freshman year, about that middle point of the year.
Yeah, later on.
Really picks everything up, and maybe a couple other guys a little banged up. He'll really start to move on.
Yeah, and Shane, speaking of Dante Kozar, how nice was it to see him on the football field again after that horrific injury against Marshall? He's running routes exactly like he did back then, as if that leg injury never happened. That was great to see.
Yeah, it's good to see him back. He had a tough drop. I'd like to see more production out of that position. I know people think it's a typical slot receiver, but, go out there, pick up the first downs, get in space, kind of just move the chains. And I think both Willie and him, someone needs to kind of grasp that, someone that the quarterback can really trust. I will say that, when they came out, without getting too technical, they were using a lot of two tight ends, splitting Harrison out, either out wide in the slot. I think John Rain played like the entire scrimmage. That kid was always on the field. They were giving him a lot of reps. He was working a tight end. He's working the slot. They are going to use those guys like wide receivers. So I think between hopefully Willie, Dante, and the combination of tight ends kind of in that position, they need to find some meaningful production out of them. I think, we talked about it last week. I think they're a little bit more prepared for what their wide receiver situation looks like, and they're getting a little bit more creative to create opportunities in the passing game. I will say the one major disappointment I had was that someone needs to develop and be a threat down the field. James Charles mentioned it, that it's really difficult to go 12 plays every drive.
Yeah.
Unless we're getting huge bursts from the running back, you cannot live off long drives. I mean, and you go 12 plays, there's going to be a holding. There's going to be a mistake play that's just going to kill a drive, and they need some bursts. And I think that's even with the camp that John Mitchell's at, they're kind of missing that. You know, you just need you need a 70-yard touchdown, you know, every so often just to.
Right. Or 30, 40-yard gain. I mean.
Yeah, you need that. So there wasn't that the receivers were disappointing on Saturday. They weren't throwing a lot, but I just expected more. I think Mitchell had one catch. Jordan Merrill only had one catch. It was tough out there. You know, granted, like I said, they're rotating the quarterbacks, but I'd really like to see that develop in the next scrimmage.
I mean, at least just to keep the defense guessing, to help spread the field, keep the linebackers off. You don't want too many guys in the box. I mean, they're just going to guess you're going to do a 5-yard slant route or you're going to run it. We have to be versatile. And it's good that we're going to have, you know, the offensive line experience to be able to do that. Running back depth. You know, defensive coordinator Glenn Spencer, when he was talking to the press on Monday, let it slip that Chris Robison is going to win us a lot of games. So take that as you will. That's basically them saying he's our number one. It is just finding that deep threat downfield at the wide receiver position, because even Charlie Weiss Jr. said that. But wide receiver, it's a toss-up. That's something that we've been talking about all off-season long. So you hit the nail on the head. I love that because not a lot of people are talking about it.
I think, you know, there wasn't a lot of, especially deep down the field throws, because the defensive line just dominated the offensive line for most of the game.
Yeah.
There was a lot of mixing and matching. So I think that certainly could play into it, because it seemed like nearly every single down, what the quarterback wanted to do, whether it was stay in the pocket or look downfield, just he wasn't able to. And I think there was more impromptu running in this scrimmage than they probably would have liked. But I think that's something to keep in mind.
I thought the starting O-line was fine. I think they were good. Where FAU is going to struggle, and this is due to some JUCOs leaving. The second team offensive line at one point was 3 freshmen.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are. You know, it's the
especially
type of place where we don't have depth.
3 true freshmen, and actually, if you count Doug Johnson and Devin Hayes, who they love a lot. They love both those guys. I think would be really nice tackles. They just don't have experience. They have great frames. And Marquise Robinson, we have some nice depth at tackle, but up the middle, just because of some, you know, kind of like receiver attrition, they're gonna have to go young. You know, Jake Jones hasn't been practicing, so our true backup center isn't. They're teaching Federico Vangas. I think they see him as a long-term center. He played guard in high school. He's really smart. They like him a lot. He's a good blocker. He just played guard in high school, so he's still learning how to snap. There's some his snaps weren't great. And eventually they started, you know, they moved Kick Federico back over to guard. Just I think they wanted more consistent snap. And a walk-on true freshman, Nick Marino from St. Thomas, was playing backup center. Next to him, they were rotating Humphrey, who's a walk-on, you know, freshman guard, and then they were also playing Deshaun Richardson, the pokey. You know, they looked good on some, and I think they're all really talented kids. They're just, if there's any injuries to our you know, center guard or you know, any of our 2 guards, it's going to get tricky. It's going to be it'll get weird real quick. I mean, there's outside of 5 teams in the country, everyone is looking at 2 positions right now going, we cannot afford an injury.
Yeah.
Right there. I mean, even Florida, University of Florida, because of all the things that have happened, they're rolling into the Miami game with like 6 corners, and 2 of them are true freshmen.
Yeah.
Hurricanes are probably starting a freshman at left tackle. When I talk about them, it's common. Everyone's looking at a position right now going, this is tight. This is going to be a little rough. You know, this is why there's only 1 Alabama and Clemson every year. Yeah. The backup line's just young. They're talented. It's not like, I'm not saying there's a bunch of scrubs there. That's far from true. These guys are going to be really good. I would love to see these guys 3 years from now. I think that they're going to be some of the best groups we have. Yeah. But it's a little tough up the middle right now. And then when you factor that in the scrimmage, you know, one of the reporters, I will say, was like, oh, I was really bad. And it's like, well, you had 3 true freshmen, and our backup D-line was David Bevlin, senior. Okay, he's been here.
Right.
Noah Jefferson, Kevin McCary, senior.
And especially now that Noah Jefferson, is such a ball hawk, had the interception on Tronti at the scrimmage. On Monday, he picked off Tronti again at practice. I mean, we should just line him up at the nickel at this point, so he even get his hands on the ball. They definitely the freshman O-line players definitely did have their hands full.
He talked about Lane is way more honest than most coaches.
Oh,
Lane
yeah.
said after the scrimmage, people think it's coach speak, but he's not just coach speaking. He said after the scrimmage that, there's days where, and I posted this, where Noah Jefferson looks like a D tackle from USC, and there's days that he frustrates us. It's probably why he's on the second team right now. Tim Bonner, Will Davis, who's just been a consistency. He's been playing since he was a true freshman at FAU. I don't think he gets enough credit, for everything he's done at this school. He's pretty much this will be his third year starting. So it's him and then Leate McCarthy and Ray Ellis. But I want to see these guys perform come Saturdays because we thought the same thing last year.
That's a good point.
To completely pivot to something else, how do you all feel about the kicker battle right now between Vladdy Rivas and Aaron? Aaron, if you're listening to this, I'm going to butcher your last name, and I apologize. I'm still trying to learn it. Jarahari, I want to say. Aaron had a 47-yard field goal that he converted last Saturday at the scrimmage. Vladdy made 2 field goals. Both were solid, pretty impressive. What are your 2 cents on it, Dan?
I'll take whoever can kick it through on field goals. I feel like we talk about college kickers too much, but whoever's going to give us the best chance. I mean, I think you could say what's somewhat concerning is nobody's kind of pulled ahead, but with college kickers, you never know. They could be the most consistent, and then when the game's on the line, they're not, and then they could be terrible. And then Greg Joseph, who's kicking for the Browns now, I've never felt like he was a superstar kicker. So I don't know.
Missed 2 field goals in the bowl game. College kickers are tough. If I remember when we were talking about Rivas last year, and he kind of started slow, and in the middle of the season he was good, and then like after the Marshall game, it all kind of unspiraled again. He actually talked to me.
He was injured too, wasn't
he? Yeah, and and I asked him. I said, "Did you kind of retool?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "Kicking is just all mental. Just rebuilt." They go, "We love having a kicking battle." He goes, "It's neck and neck. We like pushing each other." But I will just say, set for FAU fans moving forward. Create reasonable expectations for college kickers. Their success rate, if you just go to the median every year, it's just about 70%, maybe 69, 60% is the median college kicker. I think we can expect, and I think that if we just get just above the median, which is going to mean there's going to be some misses and probably 1 or 2 of them important moments. College kickers, Lane likes to go for it. We know that, so he's going to try to limit that as much as possible. He's the only coach I've seen go for it on his own 11, down 23. So people don't realize, I listened to an interview last year, and I think I talked about this story on the podcast last year. They had the Dolphins special teams coach, and they were interviewing him. The Dolphins took Jason Sanders. For anyone who's a Dolphins fan, no, that kicker had a great rookie year. I think he was like 18-21, had 2 game-winning kicks. He was a really good rookie kicker. His senior year at New Mexico State, he was 7 or 13, just over 50%. Which people, when they drafted him, were like, "What are you doing taking this kid who's not good?" And he explained that in college, kicking is, he goes, we don't even look at their stats because the holder, there's just a lot more variables. You don't have like in the NFL, you have a veteran long snapper that's been there 15 years. You have a guy who's been holding kicks for 15 years. In college, you kind of don't have that. There's tendency, the blockers are not as good. You're not as experienced on special teams. So there's just a lot more variables in college. It's why you can go any Saturday and you can watch college football all day. There's going to be college kickers where a game comes down to it and you go, why did you put your college kickers? And so, Revis did say that he's got his best friend holding for him this year, and that's been a big confidence boost. So I think there'll be a big improvement. But still expect Lane to go for it. If it's 4th and 2 or at the 22 and he's feeling it, Lane's going for it. So
yeah. I think a bigger concern, and I really felt last year punting cost us a couple games, or just complete shanks. So I think that's a bigger thing than kicking. We've got a lefty Aussie punter this year. I'm more concerned about punting. And again, you said Lane goes for it a lot.
They didn't punt on Saturday during the scrimmage. Sometimes teams will just go through cutting those mock non-touch.
They did a little bit before the scrimmage started, but that was just kind of more like drills, and the gunners were practicing gunning, I guess you could say.
And scrimmage, they went full tackling the whole scrimmage, which I found interesting. I don't think they've done that before. I think they've maybe only done it for parts of the scrimmage, not taking down. Lane did say something interesting, and we talked about this week. He said a week ago, they battle how much they want to do full takedown, and he said, after watching after last year's Oklahoma game, I think we're going to tackle a little bit more this fall. He knows it's always just a risk because you're taking an injury risk. But, I did find that interesting. They were tackling well.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of I guess we'll move on. We actually, for the first time, I think, all camp, we had both our offensive and defensive coordinators speak to the media. Shane, was one of the things outside of Spencer making Robison the starter, what was one of the things that kind of stuck out about what he was saying?
He was talking about and we mentioned this last week, one of the things I said, and I talked him up last week, and he just talked about what a leader Kevin Brown has become.
Yep.
He's kind of the voice of the defense. He said something interesting that he's chirping our language. I thought was a good quote, that he's just up there speaking, the coaches speak. He's speaking what they need. And Devon, just his attitude. He had an interception in the scrimmage, and we spoke to him after the scrimmage, and he was they look like they're just having fun playing this defense. These defensive backs love it. He was saying that we just can't wait to go to practice and just wreak havoc. Like, we're excited to practice in this defense. He goes, we have a lot more freedom. They cross-train. They run a lot of, kind of three safeties with a nickel. And, there's no real true strong safety. They have a position called the star, which is kind of like your extra linebacker safety hybrid, which you see a lot, now. And he's like, there's just a lot of freedom in it. And he's like, we can just play relax and play like Florida DBs do. And that's aggressive. And you can just tell in their attitude, they love playing the defense.
And that's something that you alluded to, Shane. That's something that we want to see out of Florida DBs. We talked about this last week. A program like ours in the state of Florida, G5, we should be able to easily reload our defensive back position every single year. We lost a lot of talent last year in defensive backfield. We should be able to replace that easily. So I'm excited that they're excited. I want our DBs to play with that Florida-style swagger, that aggressiveness, that in-your-face, I'm going to beat you, you're not going to catch a single ball on me. And that's just tough cookies. I'm really excited for that swagger to come back.
FAU, you talk about reloading. FAU kind of has. We've had a DB playing on an NFL roster for the past 6 years. If you go,
Herb Miller had an interception the other night for the Chiefs. I don't know what Soar plays with the Chiefs as well. You got to think Andrew Soar was kind of a guy who didn't get a ton of playing time because he was always kind of between safety and linebacker and stuff.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's just in an NFL camp for considering everything is amazing.
Speaking of which, really tough to see about Keith Reeser's leg injury.
Yeah.
After he was with the AAF team in Orlando, he got picked up by the Chiefs. And it was their second day of camp. And I'm not sure if it was an ACL again, but it's not good. It's not good.
Yeah, it's tough, but just the fact we keep putting these guys there. We know about Caron LeBlanc. It's good to see these guys kind of go to the next level and produce. And I think the talent. I mean, I can't even in the scrimmage. It's a good thing. I don't think James Pierre had a tackle. They just don't throw at him.
Yeah.
I remember after in the press box, I'm like, did James Pierre out there today? I mean, he is shutting down a side of the field. I don't know. I'd have to go back and rewatch to see if I was correct on that, but that kid is just, he is crazy talented. Our quarterbacks just seem to know not to go his direction.
Yeah.
We're DBU. We're DBU. That's it.
In Conference USA, for sure.
When it comes to Group of 5 schools, I mean, UCF has some decent DBs, but
their secondary is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be tough to throw on them again this year like it was last year. Hopefully they're not going to do any illegal, helmet-to-helmet defenseless hits on Harrison Bryant, but I'll see that another day. We're DBU, so it's really exciting to see that. Maybe we can, fortify that, and that can be our calling. Defensive backs that are, on the edge of P5 programs will say, I want to go to Florida Atlantic, be coached up there because they have put DBs into the NFL consistently.
Was there anything for either of you? Then we'll kind of finish up with this with what Charlie Weiss said. I mean, I know he talked a lot about the tight ends and kind of that's their safety. Quarterback safety net, if you will, which makes sense because of the talent that there is at the tight end position. But anything that kind of caught your ear from what he had to say?
I feel like he's a little bit of an opposite when it comes to Lane because, at least in the way he speaks to media, because I feel like Charlie Weiss Jr. does do a good amount of coach speak. One thing that I did like from his presser on Monday was that he mentioned that we might use Raymond Smith, tight end freshman, a little bit more, which is going to be interesting. I'm not sure how he's going to get in there with John Rain and Harrison Bryant being the 2-1 respectively. It'll be interesting to see. He also said that, I mentioned earlier, that wide receiver is really the only concern he has right now. The only thing he has to get figured out, I think, was the exact quote.
I think you're right. I like how we talked about the tight end. He also elaborated what everyone else has been saying about Chris Robinson. So, he didn't go into depth with it. I do agree. He did talk about with the tight ends and how they're going to use them. I think they're kind of telling you this is our main safety net and everything we've kind of seen from Rain and Ryan. That's who the passing game is going to be run through this year.
All right.
Yeah, not a bad thing. So, I think that about wraps it up for us. Again, make sure you. We're doing a little bit more, have a little bit more coverage this year. Check us out on Instagram. Our Instagram is FAU Inside the Burrow. Our Twitter is just Inside the Burrow. Make sure you check us out both places. And then for those that may have seen or haven't seen, the podcast is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, which we're really excited about to be able to bring you guys this year. So certainly make sure to check out Shane and Jack and myself on Twitter and Instagram if you feel like doing that. Like always, if you subscribe either through it on YouTube, because I can see that a lot of people still watch it on YouTube, or you watch it straight from Owl's Nest, take the link there. That's fine. We just kind of want to reach as many platforms and kind of get you guys be able to interact with FAU Owl fans as much as possible. So we'll call it a night, and we'll see you guys next week. Go Owls.